In this video, I will show you the easiest way to transform a regular table into a board gaming table. I'll teach you everything that I've learned from my builds so far, and this will actually be my third gaming table that I've built this way. So, as we move forward with this project, I will also show you how I made my other tables, as every table has their own challenges. But this is not just a random table. I inherited it from my grandmother, and it was actually her parlor room table, which we were only allowed to use for special occasions. And to honor her wishes, we will also only use it for special occasions. Playing board games. The only thing that worried me going into this project was that we only had a week to buy materials, film everything, and actually build the table. And for some reason, things never goes as planned when I'm involved. Our schedule is quite tight.
Oh yeah, I smell it.
Yeah, you can smell it. Yeah. Normally the first thing I usually do is to go online to look for a second-hand table. I do this to save some time and money instead of building a table from scratch. And you can usually find a pretty good deal. Which brings me to my first advice. Don't buy a round table if you want to keep things simple. Straight cuts are just easier to deal with. Another important thing I look for is the frame. I want it to be high enough so I can leave figures and pieces in there without worrying about them being too tall.
Whoa!
Now when you understand the importance of the frame, another important thing is of course the size of the table. Then look at how the legs are attached. I find it easiest if the legs are attached to the frame like this. Now the only thing we need is some tools, materials and a place to build our table. Luckily we decided to have our vacation this year on the west coast of Sweden, where my lovely parents live, with all their lovely tools. If you don't have any tools, you will come a long way with a simple jigsaw. With the help of fabric you will be able to hide any imperfections later on. If you don't want to invest in your own tools, remember that you always can try to borrow or rent them. Here you can see that the table has some problems that we have to solve. The tabletop is in two pieces, so if someone spills a drink, cheers! Our board game underneath will be in great danger. The legs are also attached to the tabletop and not the frame. Bad. These are things I typically avoid. While we were thinking on the solutions for our table, we went and bought some fabric and plywood. A common theme of my tables is that I use a lot of fabric. I think it looks nice and it gives the table a luxurious feel. I want my guests to run their hands over the fabric and get blown away over how good it feels. I also want the fabric to have the right amount of stretch, as this makes it easier to hide wrinkles by stretching the fabric. I also bought this material that reminds me of some kind of polyester cotton. This is perfect to create that extra softness to your table, to make it easier to pick up cards. But not too soft so that you can't read your D20. That's it, 20, right? I also found these really strong magnets that I wanted to use to help guide the two tabletops into the right place onto the table frame. Then we went and bought the 12mm plywood for the play area and the armrest. Now let's disassemble the table. Then we measured out everything for the play area. Because of the round shape, I couldn't cut this out with my other tools. This wouldn't be such a big of a deal if it wasn't for our time schedule. We are out on the countryside and the nearest shop is like 1 hour away. So I decided to call my brothers for help. My first call, no luck. He didn't have one. My oldest brother might have a jigsaw, but he's on vacation. He actually had one. But he's not really sure where it is and he's not at home. After a vague description of where it might be, we went there to see if we could find it.
Yes!
Let's go. Finally back again and let's finish this. On the earlier tables I've made, when measuring and cutting out the play area, I usually measure the inside of the frame but make it a couple millimeters smaller. This is to account for the fabric which will wrap around the play area, and this should give us a nice snug fit. On this table I decided to attach the play area underneath the frame, like this, which will give it more stability when the legs are attached. I also made the armrest a little bit wider so that it hangs out over the play area. This will make it easier to staple the fabric on underneath. But before that, we need to sand down the edges. And now, time for fabric. We didn't like how the inside of the frame looked, so we decided to cover it with some fabric as well. Do you like it?
I love it!
Here I realized our mistake. Because of how this table is built, we have to screw on the legs to the play area before putting on the fabric. Which is quite obvious when you think about it. But we obviously didn't think. So while we rip up everything and start over, this might be a good time to show you what I've learned from my other builds. On this build I basically only added two major things. The play area with this nice fabric that I mentioned before, and the armrest for comfort. I also added these to hide the metal part where the legs are attached, but that's very optional. And that's what I like with building your own board game table. You can make it as easy or advanced as you like. If you wanted to, you could basically finish your project after inserting the play area, resulting in the cheapest board gaming table possible. But the problem with this simpler design is the lack of extra space for things like the rulebook or snacks and drinks that you want easy access to. So I actually added these side tables that you can hang on each side with help of these hooks. If you want an easier way to add cup holders without building them into your table, you can actually buy this lånespelare from Ikea. Shortly after I built this table, we moved to a bigger apartment, so I wanted a bigger table for our gaming group.
Are all of your friends coming? Then we're gonna need some more chairs.
No, actually that's too many. In this second build, I went with a completely different approach for the drinks and snacks tables. So I made this rail for these boards, so I have complete freedom and can customize the play area however I like. Just have a few friends over? Perfect! More space for snacks and drinks. Playing a huge epic game? No worries, board games aren't really compatible with snacks and liquids anyway. If you're doing this side table solution, it could be a good idea to add something like this barrier so that you don't keep losing your dice.
It's a 20!
But that's not all. This rail can work as a great place to play or store your cards without taking up space on the actual play area. You can integrate the cup holder right into the armrest, but I often find it a bit tricky. To have room for your cup holder, you have to have a very wide armrest, and you also need to think about where the frame is. You will probably need to put them inside the frame, which takes away space from your play area, something I'm not really willing to compromise on. Another thing we haven't touched on yet is the lighting. You rarely see a board game table online without the lights. Sure, it looks cool, but I can't really remember when we actually used them. The extra step of having to plug in the lights meant that we never used them. So in the future, I will consider to use battery-powered lights instead. For more inspiration and very detailed explanations, I highly recommend this post on Board Game Geek from Darren. He has compiled a list over game table features and how to make them. I'll put the link in the description. And now, back to the build. Like you saw before, sometimes you really need to think and do things in the right order to avoid mistakes like this. To make sure the table will have a good height, we have to shorten the legs. The play area will add extra height to the table. So that's why we need to cut the legs. Then we attach them using glue and screws to make it really secure. And now, fabric. This process is quite straightforward. We used a small amount of glue on the soft fabric just to make sure it stays in place when we stretch the other fabric over it. And then I secured the fabric with a staple gun. With only one day left, it feels like we maybe can complete this just in time. Now it's time for the magnets. The table is actually not the perfect circle, which is why we want the tabletop to line up correctly. I don't know if this is gonna work, but these magnets feel really strong, and maybe they can help us find the right position when we put on the tabletop. So I carved out the height of the magnets in the armrest and the tabletop, and then secured them with superglue. The first tests with the magnets felt promising, but I think the added thickness of the fabric created too much space, so in the end it didn't work at all. So this was a total waste of time. The final thing we did was to try and create this barrier, just as some protection if we spill something on the table. It's not perfect, but it's the best we could do with our time limit. Here you can see all my board game tables in action, so you can compare them yourself. And finally, here is my grandmother's table transformed into a board game table. I'm actually really happy with the results, but I might come back and make some improvements in the future. What table was your favorite? Tell me in the comment section. If you enjoyed this video and want to see our future projects on how to upgrade your board game experience, make sure you subscribe. And thanks for watching.